Okay, I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting of Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020 to order. In response to COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with Ministerial Order 192, I'd like to call the Comox Valley public in-person attendance is not permitted. Tuesday, June 23rd, if members of the public wish to provide input, they should contact the CVRD Legislative Service Department, and live webcasts and recordings are available at our website. I'd like to first acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And as part of our regular procedure, we're going to read from the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 12. Indigenous peoples have the right to manifest, practice, develop, and teach their spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies. The right to maintain, protect, and have access to privacy to their religious and cultural sites, the right to use and control of their ceremonial objects, and the right to the repatriation of their human remains. And states shall seek to enable the access and or repatriation of ceremonial objects and human remains in their possession through fair, transparent, and effective mechanisms developed in conjunction with Indigenous peoples concerned. And with that, we move to item B, open meeting attendance for COVID-19.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And this is changes to ministerial orders that were recently made by the province, which ask that if we are not allowing attendance of the public, that we give reasons why and that we give alternatives. So the recommendation is that in accordance with Ministerial Order M192, and in the interest of health and safety, in-person attendance by the public at this meeting not be permitted, as procedures and protocols are still being developed to ensure adherence with public health officer recommendations and requirements related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And further, that in the interest of openness, accountability, and transparency, this meeting be live streamed, video recorded, and posted to the regional district website. And then we move to item C, which is in-camera meeting.
Sure.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we need to vote.
Yeah, I guess we'll vote on that later. But I was going to, well, say that it does make sense, but ask if staff had any comments on if this room could be configured to have at least a modest audience at some point, and if they know what that looks like.
Madam Chair and directors, thank you for the question. It is something that staff are reviewing with the best practices and guidance that come from the province. We will inform you as that goes on. We know that many of the directors wish to have an attendance meeting sooner than later, and we certainly will keep you apprised. I would also just like to draw to the attention of the directors that at the request of the representative of 3L, Mr. Rob Buchan, he is in attendance at tonight's meeting, which is counter to this order, but just so it was his request in consideration of a very important development application that they have before.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you for that. So we will go to vote on the recommendation of open meeting attendance. Hamir?
In favor.
Grieve?
In favor.
Arbor?
Yeah.
Frisch? Hillian?
In favor.
Morin?
In favor.
Cole Hamilton?
In favor.
Brandt?
In favor.
And Swift?
In favor.
And that carries. Thank you. Now we're on to item C, in-camera meeting.
Move the recommendation to go in camera.
And
Thank you. And the recommendation is that the committee adjourn to in-camera session pursuant to the following subsection of section 90 of the community charter. 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of the committee/board could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the regional district if they were held in public. And finally, that the in-camera portion convene immediately following the open portion of the meeting. And is there anyone opposed to moving in camera? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. And we're on to adoption of minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. And these are the minutes from June 16th from the regular board meeting. Any questions or comments on the minutes? And is there anyone opposed to adoption? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. And we're on to petitions and delegations.
Move
And-
receipt.
Thank you. We have a delegation online from Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation and the Forest Enhancement Society of BC, Dan Buffett and Steve Kazuki. Is that right? Yeah, respectively, the Habitat Conservation and from Forest Enhancement Society. And I will pass it over to our delegation. We have your slideshow up on our screen here. Hopefully those online can see it.
Yes, works for me. Thank you very much, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity for Steve and I to speak with you today to give you just an overview of both our organizations, how we're working together on fish and wildlife habitat, not only on the island, but in the Comox area. So good afternoon, everyone. Maybe actually just a check to make sure the volume I'm speaking at is okay.
It's good here in the boardroom.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So I'll just move to the second slide there, just to talk about our organizations as a whole.
We're just working on that.
No problem. That's okay. So who are we? So the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, we fund conservation projects for both fish, wildlife, habitat, and as well as education about BC's freshwater resources throughout BC. And myself, my name is Dan Buffett. I'm the CEO of Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. And Steve, did you want to just tap in just a quick overview of FESBC?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hi, directors. Nice to meet with you again, this time virtually. It wasn't very long ago that I was able to visit with you in person and give you a presentation on the Forest Enhancement Society. I'm the executive director, and we, as you probably remember, we do environmental stewardship in BC's forests. And we're very, very happy to partner with what we think of as a sister organization, the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. So primarily I'm here today to support the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation and my friend Dan. And I'll just do a quick recap a little later on in the presentation.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Steve. Next slide, please. So I'll give a little bit of background about HCTF and who we are. I'll actually, and maybe just forward to the next slide there, please. Perfect, thank you. And so our background, so as many organizations, we're a not-profit charitable foundation. We began in 1981, and at that time, a number of anglers and hunters and trappers and guides agreed to put together funding on an annual basis to improve the conservation outcomes for fish and wildlife and habitat in BC. And the way they did this was to agree each year as part of their license, which we call a surcharge, they would pay several dollars and contribute that to the province. And that money in turn comes to us, the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. And what we do with that is we receive or request a number of proposals from many groups, whether it's government, non-government, stewardship groups, and they put in proposals for this funding. And through a process of our technical reviewers, we review and evaluate all these projects to basically put, those limited dollars collectively together into the best fish and wildlife projects in BC. Now, we've been around for nearly 40 years, and now, as a result, some of our key statistics is we've granted more than $189 million in grants for nearly 3,000 projects in BC. Thank you. Next slide. In this year, wanted to give you a quick sketch of what that looked like. So this year we had our largest year of funding for projects. So this not only comes from the surcharge that I mentioned before, but it also comes from funding we have from the government. It comes from court awards. It comes from donations. It comes from several other sources as well too, to come together and create this $9 million that we're giving to the experts really in the field to deliver 180 projects this year. And as we step down into sort of a smaller geographic area, what does that look like? Well, that's about 31 projects on Vancouver Island at about $1.3 million. And then as we jump even smaller into a smaller geographic area within the Comox area, there's some of the example projects are for the Taylor's Checker Spot Butterfly Project, as you see over here on the log here on the picture on the right on Denman and Hornby Island. It's funding given to the Solom River Society for a gravel bar restoration. We have one wild school in the Comox Valley area at the Echo Puntledge Park. And again, these wild school and in general are connecting kids with nature. And also to facilitate that, in the Comox Valley, we have 17 GO grants. These are given to schools to underwrite the cost of buses to get students out to nature, and also to hire some facilitators to help schools, again, put together programs for the project. And next slide. And spatially, we just did a map just to show you the projects and locations. As with a number of things, a lot of concentration of projects in the lower 1/3 of BC. The blue dots represent those projects that are fishing. For example, there's a number of family fishing events that we fund as well too with other partners. Projects on the wildlife side, that with many partners that Steve will talk about with in terms of FESBC on the wildlife side. And the yellow dots just are the stewardship of helping encourage local stewardship groups to create stewards for our fish and wildlife. And what I'm going to do is hand it over to Steve to talk a bit about FESBC and the joint projects that we've had, and really, building on our partnership over the last year or two. And so, Steve, I'll just hand it over to you next. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, just to recap, you saw this back in March. It's just kind of an itemization as to where we've allocated our money so far to which types of projects. So in BC and for a lot of people, wildlife or wildfire risk reduction is very important to protect the infrastructure and people and values and get emergency access and egress. So very important topic for us. Improving forests by reforesting them. That's also important. We have wildlife habitat improvement, and almost all of our funding that we have, the vast majority of it, we funnel through our trusted partner Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, because they have so many excellent, outstanding technical and professional staff and great administration and a very strong track record of proven performance over the last 40 years. So for us, it's a no-brainer to funnel our funding through them. And that's why we have these joint wildlife improvement projects. On the fiber recovery side, fairly small. And the reason is that most of our fiber utilization, where we are able to avoid slash burning and instead use that wood waste and take it and make electricity or pellets, which is used often as a substitute for coal, and also to plant trees. That is carbon beneficial. And so we categorize the utilization. Most of it goes into the carbon pot, which is our largest category at $138 million. And so far to date, we have funded 250 projects valued at $233 million across the province. Next slide, please. And just to refresh you, these are the projects that we funded in your local area. If you remember, we had Jason Hutchinson from the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. He co-presented with me and answered a number of your questions. So just a refresh as to what's going on right in your local area. All right, thanks, Dan. Back to you. Next slide.
Thanks, Steve. And I think as Steve pointed out, one of, the benefits that we saw in this joint partnership was as Steve alluded to, with our technical review process. But what we saw with FESBC was an organization that had a mandate to improve wildlife habitat, stretch those extra dollars, and leverage further funding into wildlife habitat. And for us, working cooperative together, as many people realize, partnerships is a key principle. It's worked out really well to streamline a process and stretch and leverage our dollars more. And as we can see at the bottom, the bottom bullet there that's a significant contribution from FESBC of $3 million on these shared conservation objectives. So again, it's together we can contribute a lot more resources and achieve so much more on the landscape. Next slide, please. And then finally, just to give you, some of these jointly funded projects as well too, was a goshawk habitat project looking at the habitats across southern coastal BC. So that includes, Vancouver Island and a lot of key forested areas as well too. Looking at, what's needed for Roosevelt elk in terms of what they need for their habitat and their management. Looking at the numbers of cougar on Vancouver Island, and continuing to build and support the reestablishment of Vancouver Island marmots. So these are all sort of big, they're larger animals, they're in our forests, but when you're protecting the habitat for all these large species, that's also protecting, the small wetlands, the small invertebrates, all the other key smaller features that are needed within the forest as well too. So that's just an important, I guess, consideration, of these partnerships and what they achieve. Next slide. So we'll just leave it there. If there's time for questions, happy to answer those, but turn it back over to the directors there. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Just going to bring up the list of participants so we can see if there's any hands up. While we're doing that, we'll go to Director Frisch. You have a question?
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks for the presentation. It was really great to see some of the programs that you're providing through the FESBC, and one in particular, my own son was lucky enough to take part in, and that's the wilderness schools. And I think it's really important to keep our kids or to teach our kids to be connected. It's important for us to stay connected, of course, to the natural world around us. And those GO grants are also really important because one of the biggest problems right now is schools can't afford to bus their kids, out of the cities and so on. So thanks for doing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, it's the GO grants and those wilderness are we're reaching out certainly for partners to keep building on those types of programs. As you mentioned, they're much needed in this day and age for sure.
We have another question from Director Hamir.
Thank you. And again, I'll echo the thank you for the presentation. Is my volume okay? Okay, super. So a couple of questions. How are you forecasting your funding moving forward in light of COVID? How has it impacted that surcharge on licenses? Are you noticing changes?
Definitely. You know, we're still, you know, just partway through it and seeing some of the results, but we know our funding is going to be down this year. You know, we're in that 20, 30, somewhere in that range, probably reduction. We have made contingencies that we know all our projects that were funded early this year will be fully funded through the project as well. So that's, you know, important for all potential funders to people that have been received funding or approval funding. But yeah, we're looking at then what does that look like in the coming year for projects, and we will see whether things bounce back out. If more people are out fishing this summer, as we move into other phases there, that we may see some return for some funding, but definitely playing it conservative at this moment and step by step.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you contacted your fundees. So do you have like standing projects that you fund year after year, or are you always looking for new ones?
We're always looking for new ones. We do have several proponents will put in 2-year or 3-year projects depending on their scope. So we fund all of those, but we also fund annual single-year projects. So we're always looking to put the funding towards the best projects. So always open to new projects for sure.
Okay, because I think we have a project here that we fund as an RD through our grant and aids, the youth ecological restoration. I don't know if that's a project that you've ever funded, where at youth, these are slightly older students than would be at Ecole Puntledge Park, but some of them are at risk, and they're taken into the woods and trained on how to do environmental monitoring and identification. They work in many of our parks, but they also work in Morrison Creek, I think especially. So I'll try and connect you two. If it's possible for you to forward your contact information to staff. And then lastly, I think this may be a question for Steve. Director Grieve had an interesting idea of one way to try and reduce open burning, because I understand, with your advocacy around forests and reducing forest fires, the idea of funding the regional district to purchase chippers so that people don't necessarily burn all of their wood product, but instead chip it. Is that the type of project that you would fund? I didn't see that listed in the type of stuff that you do, but is that an opening there?
Well, we wouldn't fund any capital for you to purchase equipment, but if you had equipment, and there might be some federal funding, I know of a small remote First Nations community up in the Williams Lake area, and they were running on propane. And they got some funding elsewhere from other sources to, build the boiler, install it, connect the hot water piping system to the medical facility and the administration building and other institutional buildings. And what FESBC did, what we funded, is we fund the fiber. So if there's opportunity to avoid slash burning, we will provide some financial assistance to prevent that burning and instead use that woody biomass to make green, clean energy. And in the case of that First Nations village, they replaced propane, which is a fossil fuel, with heat energy created from wood, which is a natural source of green energy perpetually. So the short answer is we'll fund the fiber, but we won't fund your capital.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from here in the boardroom. Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation and the good work done by both organizations. My question is for Dan. Dan, are you familiar with the Kuskusum project, which is probably one of the more significant conservation projects in our area involving the restoration of salmon habitat?
Yes, I am. I was previously actually worked with Ducks Unlimited for a number of years. And then as I've been now CEO at HCTF, we have had some preliminary discussions about the project there. Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably wouldn't fund that project at this stage because I'm guessing you don't fund land acquisition. Would that be correct?
No, we do fund land acquisition. We actually have an intake that closes in July for land acquisitions. We have one intake for land acquisitions each year for funding. We also fund the conservation, the restoration as well. One of the things on the restoration side there that would be applicable is, if you're removing, rock that's not necessarily within the trust purposes of HCTF, but once you get into that more ecological habitat restoration, those type of activities would be eligible at HCTF.
That's great. This is a project that's a collaborative venture between Project Watershed, the City of Courtenay, and the Comox First Nation. And we are a few $100,000 short of our goal. So if you have an intake coming up that would consider acquisition, it's not too late to get an application in. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. It's not too late, and I can provide that on the website. I know this year, obviously, sort of previously, we will be just looking at where our total dollar amount is available this year, but definitely we always welcome projects for acquisition, and we just evaluate them as they come in and prioritize them till we don't have any more money left in that acquisition pot. So I can follow up and make sure you've got those contacts or with the proponent there.
Well, we'd be very happy to help you out until you have no money left in that fund.
Exactly, I bet.
Very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. So thank you very much for the presentation. Both organizations sound like they're doing and funding some really good work. So thank you for making the board aware of that.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, that's carried. And we're on to reports. Item 1 is Transit Management Advisory Committee.
Move receipt.
Second.
It was moved and seconded in the boardroom and out online, so that's great. So we've got 2 sets of minutes here. The first is from Comox Valley Transit Management Advisory Committee, April 23rd, 2020. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Director Frisch?
Yeah, I just wanted to make note that in reading them, it looks like the CVRD is working with the City of Courtenay to make sure that there's the best possible bus service while we repair our bridge on 5th Street. And so I hope that that's going well, and I'll try and follow up with their staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Arbour, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment as well. I did notice that in the April 23rd minutes, there was a note about the transit future plan, and it was just put on hold, but there was no note as of the May 22nd. It didn't seem like that topic was broached. So I would like to know if there is intent to move forward with the transit future plan at some point. In context, I know that well, through AVICC, through the little bit of engagement with BC Ferries and through Director Grieve and Vanessa Craig at Nanaimo, there is starting to be a Vancouver Island Transportation Committee being established. And we'll hear about that. But I think that the transit future plan process, I think a lot of us were looking forward to it. We recognize that public engagement may be different, but 2 months ago it said that they would be investigating online tools and things like that. So I'm just wondering if there's an update on that at all. And then second, I just assume that on the financial forecast, we will receive that next month in July.
I'll hand that over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And yes, we will continue with the planning. We're working with BC Transit, and we'll be providing an update to you, the board, in July.
Oh, including the future plan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Director Grieve.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That answered a little bit of my question, which was revolving around the report alluding to a shortfall in revenue this year. And as we're plowing into the second half of 2020, I just wondered if we have any idea of how much of a gap we're going to end up with this year because of ridership and no fares, etc. But I guess that will be answered in July. So I'll hold my fire.
Yes, and I can confirm that as part of the regional district's recovery and renewal plan, we're doing that for each and every one of your services. So that update will be provided to you for transit in July, along with probably some decision points as normally we come forward with tips at that time of the year as well. So lots to be discussed about transit for this board in July.
Okay, so still on receipt of April 23rd minutes. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. And we're on to the minutes for May 22nd. Thank you. And is there anyone opposed to receipt of May 22nd minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. And we're on to item 2, Electoral Areas Service Committee for June 15th, 2020. Thank you. And these are minutes for June 15th. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. And we're on to recommendation 1. Actually, we can do 1 through 4 by general consent, as the note says.
I'll move that we move the recommendations 1 to 4 together.
Agreed. Seconded.
I'll just ask staff whether we want to do a synopsis of those, or we usually read them out for the public. So synopsis? Yeah. So that's for recommendation 1 through 4, just so the public knows what we're passing here.
Okay, so recommendation 1 is that the board approve development variance permit DV1A20 to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 4.88 meters and from 5.5 meters to 4.68 meters for the eaves for the purposes of constructing a mudroom entryway in the property at 3414 Kentwood Road, and that the corporate officer be authorized to execute the permit. Recommendation 2, that the board approve development variance permit DV12B19 to increase the maximum lot coverage from 15% to 20% for property at 1561 McDonald Road, and that the corporate legislative officer be authorized to execute the permit. Recommendation 3, that the board grant a site-specific exemption of the floodplain specifications that reduces the floodplain setback from 15 meters to 8.7 meters from the natural boundary of the Strait of Georgia for the proposed additions to a single detached dwelling with an attached garage for property at 6428 and 6448 South Island Highway. And that finally, as a condition of the site-specific exemption, the property owners, at their own expense, register a restricted covenant under Section 219 of the Land Title Act, specifying conditions that would enable the land to be safely used for the use intended according to the terms of the engineer's report by Peter Bullock, dated April 15th, 2020, which will form part of the restricted covenant, as well as an acknowledgement that no disaster financial assistance funding is available for the building or its contents, and releasing and indemnifying the Comox Valley Regional District from liability in the event any damage is caused by flooding or erosion. Recommendation 4, that the board approve development variance permit DB1C20 to reduce the minimum highway and water body frontage from 10% to 5%, reduce the minimum average width and depth ratio from 1.3 to 1.10, and reduce the minimum highway frontage from 100 meters to 0 meters for the proposed western lot in a line lot adjustment for an unaddressed lot and 3780 and 3786 Coal Lake Road, and that the corporate legislative officer be authorized to execute the permit.
Thank you so much. So this is a vote of the areas, A, B, C. Are there any questions or comments about any of those recommendations? Seeing and hearing none, I'll go through the roll. Director Arbor?
Can we reread all these things? I didn't hear quite well. I'm joking. I'm in favor.
Director Hamir?
In favor.
And Director Grief?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. And those pass, and we're on to recommendation 5. Thank you. And this recommendation is that the Comox Valley Regional District Board endorse the agency referral list as outlined in Appendix A of staff report dated June 10th, 2020, with the addition of the Manager of Fire Services and direct staff to commence the external agency referral process. And I do see a hand up, Director Arbor.
Thank you. And for the other directors, I know the link was just given, a direct link to the just the document, the further document that was submitted. But I think everybody knows to go through the EASC minutes to get the full 250 pages if they want to read the full application. So I did appreciate that. I did have a thought around the recommendation. I may suggest that we add an external agency to the list. There was a lot of emphasis and discussion around the affordable housing component. And so we do have an organization in the Comox Valley Homelessness Coalition. And I thought it would be good to get their eyes on it as well, to provide some context and feedback on this application, just to make sure that we cross all the boxes. So if my colleagues in the areas are amenable, I will be suggesting that change. Thank you.
Thank you. So I see I did skip the receipt of the of Rob Buchanan's application, so we can go back and receive that after, because we have moved and seconded this recommendation. Is there any further discussion? Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if, I did watch the electoral areas meeting and read through the material. I just wondered if staff could comment on what the process is. I know that this is for electoral areas to vote on today, but I'm hoping that maybe there'll be some questions or discussion that might benefit the electoral areas going forward with this. So I just wondered if staff could outline what the process is going forward from today. Because of course this would be just the first step in a process that would involve obviously the municipalities and KFN and others, as Director Arbor just suggested. And there's a lot to consider. So I just am hoping that there could be a bit of discussion, and I wondered if staff could outline the process a bit. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll pass that to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors, and I'll ask Alana Mullally, the Senior Manager of Regional Growth and Sustainability, to come forward and answer that question for you.
Thanks very much. Do I hit something? Sure.
We're just finding her a microphone that works.
Through the chair to the directors, thanks very much for the question. So you're right, Director Morin, this one looks a little bit different, and this is the first time that we've gone through this process. What staff are suggesting to you as a process would be that the window of opportunity for a landowner to make a proposal that triggers the amendment of the RGS is to first begin with the jurisdiction in which the land is situated. So in our case, the land is within electoral area C. The application is to the rural directors to consider an amendment to the rural official community plan and zoning bylaw, which is what you have in front of you with this report. So in terms of process, our regular process here in the rural area planning function is to begin with an external agency referral if our rural directors direct us to do that. Our next step would then be to bring the feedback that we receive from those agencies and report back to the rural directors. And we at that time as staff will bring forward a recommendation on a next step. So next steps could include for the Electoral Area Services Committee, a recommendation to the board to proceed. And what proceed would look like in this case, as you know, only the board, being the 10 of you, can initiate an amendment process to the RGS. So it could be proceed, which would essentially see a referral of the proposal to the committee of the whole and board to take a decision on whether or not you wanted staff to go down the path of a review process on this proposal. So that would be one option that you would have, and that would involve the vote of all 10 directors. The electoral area directors could also say to the applicant, we need some more information before we do anything. And so they would refer to our development approval information bylaw and get specific detailed information. They could also let the applicant know that they don't support the proposal and deny the application to amend the rural OCP and rural zoning. And if that were the case, then that wouldn't, there'd be no process for which the 10 member board would embark upon. It would just end at the electoral area director's vote as the board.
Thank you. So I just had a little side chat with staff, and I would like to propose that we table the recommendation until after the applicant submission.
I think that's important. I'll make that motion to table.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'll go through the roll. Well, actually, first I'll ask, is there anyone opposed to tabling this motion until we receive the applicant submission? And
I'm not opposed, but I'm losing a bit of volume on the speakers. So if folks could speak right into the mic, thank you.
Okay, Director Morin, is that better? Okay, so we're back to receipt of the applicant submission.
Move receipt, Danielle.
Second.
Thank you. And is there any further discussion on receipt of this submission? Director Morin, you still have your hand up. Are you wanting to speak?
No, sorry, I'll take that down. Thanks.
And again, this is a vote of the electoral areas. And this is on receipt of application. So Director Arbor?
In favor.
Director Hamir?
In favor.
And Director Grieve?
In favor.
That passes. Thank you. And we are back to
I'll move the recommendation, but with adding the Comox Valley Coalition to the referral list. Unless, yeah, that's it.
Okay, can I get a second for that? Okay,
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this recommendation? Director Grieve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and thank you for Alana for explaining the process. And I would reiterate that there's considerable process involved. That may be one of the things that that our manager of planning, long-term planning and regional growth strategy neglected to say, where there's also opportunity to adjust and change some of the application along the road. My ambition on this project is strictly to make sure that we follow a process and give everybody an opportunity to comment as it moves forward, because I think it's very important that we take every opportunity we can to see if we can possibly work out something that's amicable for both the developer and the Comox Valley, in light of the fact that the park dedication that's being presented here is something that I do think we have to turn our minds to. And I have heard in discussions at the ASC that that this time around, there seems to be a lot more flexibility. So I would urge all the directors to keep an open mind as we are actually legislated to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Morin?
Great, thanks, Chair. So just for the purposes of clarity, I'm just wondering again, sorry to staff, if you could outline what the difference is between this application coming forward in the past and coming forward now, in terms of, I mean, obviously it's changed so that it has to come through one of the municipalities or electoral areas, et cetera. But in terms of bringing this back, I know there have been a few changes, but I just want to know what the difference is between the past and now, when a decision was made in the past on this. Thanks.
I'll pass that to staff.
Thank you, Chair Kettler. Through the chair to the directors. Thank you, Director Morin. So differences here would be change to the process, which you've identified. So I'll speak to that first. And then the applicant has made some changes to the nature of the proposal when the board last considered this as an RGS amendment. So first, I'll speak to the process piece. So you're right, this is brand new. Previously, when 3L applied back in 2013 to amend the RGS, there was a window within the RGS bylaw for an individual landowner to apply directly to the board to have the board consider an amendment. In 2018, the board amended the RGS, as you know, Director Morin, to say that an individual landowner would need to work through the individual jurisdiction in order to bring forward a proposal. So that's that big piece. Does that hit the question on the process side? Or answer the question on the process?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the process is different in terms of bringing it forward, and there have been a few changes to the proposal. However, it is bringing a very similar proposal back that was denied last time. I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Director Swift, did you have a question or was it answered already? Yeah, okay. Director Hamir.
Thank you. I do have a question that's come up since electoral areas. And since the agent for 3L is in the room, I'm wondering if the board would enable or allow for that agent to come forward, because the question is probably not answerable by staff. So maybe I'll ask that first, is what's the process here?
Yes, so if it's the board's wish, we could have a vote and invite the applicant to answer questions.
Right. So,
Wait, can you turn on your microphone, please?
Sorry, what we're doing here is an agency referral list, and we seem to be getting into the entire project now, which I don't think is the intent of this motion.
Yeah, that's true. It's ESIC that has seen this information, and the board hasn't seen all the information at this point. But Director Hamir, have you made a motion then to invite the applicant to speak?
Madam Chair, just to answer Director Grant's concern, it is possible for the electoral area directors not to refer this matter for which the application would end. So it is still a very big decision as to whether they proceed with this or not. And certainly when recommendations come before the whole board, this is the opportunity for the board to ask questions. Having said that, ultimately it will be the electoral area directors that vote on this. And just as a matter of procedure, we would probably need to table this motion in order to consider a motion to Jake or comment on the procedure for allowing a delegate motion to allow a delegation.
Thank you, Russell. So while it's certainly permitted, it could also be by general consent of the board that if no one's in opposition to hearing from the applicant, then the individual could come forward, if that makes things simpler. But if there is opposition to it, then certainly the motion could be tabled and then a motion to accept the comments could be brought forward.
So I'll put forward, is there anyone opposed to inviting the applicant? Director Frisch? Are you opposed?
Well, possibly.
Okay.
I'm a little confused, but I'd like some more information before we get into a delegation to if possible.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll table the recommendation. Can I get a first and second for that?
I'll move that.
Thank you. And we'll go through the roll. This is on just tabling the current recommendation so that we could put forward a motion on whether we invite the applicant to speak today.
That's what we're doing.
Yes,
right now.
yes. That's what we're doing right now. Okay, so Director Hamir, are you in favor of tabling this motion right now?
I'll be in favor. Yeah.
Thank you. Director Grieve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe that Director Grant made a very important point, that this is just the beginning. And I think that there'll be plenty of opportunity as this winds its way through the beast. And I will not be in favor at this point.
Director Arbor?
Not in favor.
Okay. Director Frisch?
Opposed.
Director Hillian? Director Morin?
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton?
In favor.
Director Grant?
I guess for me, it depends on what the question is and whether the proponent is to answer it or whether, I mean, if it's a setup and he's not ready, then that's, so I mean, this is kind of coming out of the blue. So to me, it depends on what the question is and whether he's prepared to answer at this point.
Well, that remains to be seen. So you have to.
So I'll be opposed then.
Okay. Director Swift? And I'm in favor.
Just in case we can't hear anything.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can just make a point of order for the folks that are on the line. When you're saying yes or no, or in favor or against, if your mic can be turned on, because I didn't catch who or what the vote is right now.
It's a tie, and so it's defeated, I'm told.
Okay.
So we are back to the motion that is in front of us for the agency referral. Director Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted some more clarification on the process. So obviously this is the electoral areas that we're voting today, and they're voting to send this out for more information from the municipalities. If they get that information back and they want to move this ahead, what's the next step after that? Does it come to the board and we make a similar decision? Is that correct?
I'll pass that to staff.
Thank you, Chair Kettler. Through the chair to the directors. Thank you, Director Frisch. Yes. So that next step would be collect all the feedback, and then staff will bring forward a report to the Electoral Area Services Committee reporting out on the feedback. And we'll be asking at that time the electoral areas to make a recommendation to the board, 3-member board, on next steps for the OCP and zoning piece. And that's where the electoral area directors would vote on the 3 options. So could be to punt it over to the full member board to think about whether or not you wanted to initiate an amendment to the RGS. Could be to ask the applicant to provide more information and specific, not just generally, right? Specific information. And then the third option would be for the electoral area directors to vote for denial of the OCP and zoning application.
Okay, so there could, you know, if this is going forward through the EAC, EASC, then this board will get a chance to see more information and discuss it more. Okay, thanks.
Director Morin, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I guess just in response to a couple of the comments, as I said earlier, and Mr. Dyson reinforced that this item coming to the board, I think is also ultimately it's the decision of the electoral directors, but coming to the board does allow for some discussion and questions. And I believe in terms of the recommendation that was defeated, you know, the proponent would be coming to this meeting, I think, prepared for a lot of different questions, because that's what this process is about. So I just wanted to address that. And I guess I'm one of the things I wanted to bring up is that I wanted to know about staff time for this process. We're in a pandemic. We already are scaling back a lot of our services and we have a ton of regular business to deal with this board. And we're short-staffed, capacity issues, huge projects underway. I'd like to know if electoral areas decide to go through with this process, how is that going to impact on our staff capacity and our other projects and responsibilities and commitments that are in the works? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass that to Russell.
Thank you very much, Director and Chair. The Regional District has a Planning and Development Services group that is there to process applications and consider development proposals such as this. That's the nature of our work. At this point in time, yes, we have been busy. The department continues to receive applications for variances, as you can see, to building permits or otherwise. However, we do have the capacity to process this. If ever did come to a time where things were delayed and it had an impact on applicants and the public's ability to engage in this process, we would be informing you and letting you know. So I do not see it being an issue at this particular time, but if that ever did become an issue and we weren't able to provide the good quality service that we do to our community, I would let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, again, this is a vote of the areas, and the recommendation is for referral with the addition of referral to the Coalition to End Homelessness. It's been first and seconded. So I will go to the roll for the vote. Director Arbor?
Favor.
Director Hamir?
In favor.
Director Grieve?
In favor.
And that passes. Thank you. So we are on to item 3, Sewage Commission for June 16th. Thank you. And that's receiving minutes. Are there any questions or comments about the Sewage Commission minutes?
Madam Chair, can we ask that people mute? Thank you.
Yeah, I think everyone is muted. So is there anyone opposed to receipt of Sewage Commission minutes from June 16th? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. We're on to item 4, Comox Valley Water Committee minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Those are also from June 16th. Any comments or questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. We're on to item 5, Comox Valley Sports Center Commission minutes from June 16th as well.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing, seeing none, that brings us to item 6, Statement of Financial Information 2019. Thank you.
Second.
And that's for receipt, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll pass it over to Russell.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just as an introduction, the statement of financial information is provided for the year 2019. And while the province enabled local governments to delay the presentation of these materials, we are bringing it forward in June as we normally would. The statement of financial information is a very valuable piece of information for the public and for you, the directors. It provides the audited financials. It provides remuneration and expenses for elected officials, the employee remuneration and expenses for those employees earning over $75,000 per year, the any severance agreements, payments in supplies and goods or services totaling $25,000 or more. So those businesses that we do over $25,000 or more of business are listed, and as well as a schedule of the guarantee and indemnity payments, if any.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, we're on to the recommendation.
Move approval of the minute of the financial statement information.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, I'll go through the roll. Director Hamir.
I had a question.
Oh, sorry, Director Arbor, go ahead.
For those of us who miserably failed to submit, is there still the opportunity to do so? Oh, sorry, I'm on the next item. Apologies.
Yeah, financial
Apologies.
recommendation.
My question will hold for the next one. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, this is for approval of the 2019 Statement of Financial Information. Okay, Director Hamir.
Approve.
Director Grieve.
I approve.
Director Arbor.
Yes.
Director Frisch.
In favor.
Director Hillian.
In favor.
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton.
In favor?
Director Grant.
In favor.
Director Swift.
In favor.
Thank you. That passes. Now we're on to director's reports, January 1st to December 31st of 2019.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Director Grant was just commenting that he would like to add his report later. So Director Arbor, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, same if it's possible.
Okay.
Just a question to staff if we can submit now.
We will receive and provide you any reports that are received by ourselves. So by all means, please submit your reports and we'll present them to the board.
Thank you.
Director Grant?
May I ask actually, because this is one of those things that comes on and generally the answer is I attended all meetings. My question is, why are we doing it? If, you know, is it necessary that we do this or could we maybe just not do it?
Madam Chair, I'll just refer to James Warren to describe the process and why it's there.
Thank you. Thanks, Russell. So I think the basis for this is one, to report out for the directors to report out in a public fashion some of the activities that you've undertaken. I believe the director's remuneration bylaw speaks to this as an obligation also on the part of the directors. The timing of it allows for not only the SOFI report to be received, but also the director's reports to be received, and it provides some illustration then of the work that is undertaken by the directors.
Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering what the penalty is for non-compliance.
Director Grieve?
You can let Director Hillian know it's 20 lashes with a wet spaghetti noodle. But seriously, I think what it does show is it shows the citizens that it's not just the involvement that we have with our various boards and committees, but also the external appointments and the professional development that occurs as well. I think it encourages people to get out and volunteer for some of the area associations and the federal and provincial and local ABICC, etc. And it gives them a sense that it's not just about the matters at hand at the particular year for the regional district. But in a greater sense, it's the relationship building and the education piece as well that helps us develop our skills as directors.
Thank you very much. And I guess I'll just take this time then to thank all our directors for all their hard work on all our committees and commissions and for representing the board at all the external committees that they do. Okay. So we are still on receipt of the reports. Is anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We are on to item 8, 2020 grant and aid. Thank you. And this is from Directors Hamir and Grieve regarding our request and grant and aid to the Comox Valley Land Trust. Are there any comments or questions? Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, we're on to the recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. And the recommendation is that a grant and aid payable from the respective areas indicated be approved. Comox Valley Land Trust to assist with the land protection program, education, and the Comox Valley Conservation Partnership. Area B, $5,000, Area C, $5,000. Any comments or questions about the recommendation? Director Grieve, is your hand up from before, or are you wishing to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just so people do recognize the fact that the electoral areas sometimes have different sensitivities and sensibilities than maybe some of the urban areas. And we're very fortunate that we do have our own individual electoral area grant and aid that we can help out, especially for the conservation and ecology groups that are out there. And they tend to rely on it year after year. And they do such good work as well. So this is just one that came in a little late. I think Tim Ennis apologized that it kind of slipped his mind, I guess, with all the other things going on. So I'm very happy, as I'm sure Director Amir is as well, to support them in any way.
Thank you very much. And this is a vote of the full board. So I'll go through the roll. Director Swift.
In favor.
Director Grant.
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton.
In favor, excuse me.
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Hillian.
In favor?
Director Frisch.
In favor.
Director Arbor.
Yes.
Director Grieve.
In favor, thank you.
Director Hamir.
In favor.
Thank you. That passes. So we're on to item 9, update
Sorry,
to.
just before we leave item 8, Chair, James said an update on one of the other grants and aid, and that was before the board.
Thanks, Russell. So I just wanted to update the board on a previously awarded grant and aid from April 2020. Funds were provided to the Hornby Island Community Economic and Enhancement Corporation, otherwise known as HCTF, to support certain Facebook group administrators for communication purposes. And initially, there were some concerns raised around those Facebook groups being open to all members of the public. Through our discussions with HCTF, the Facebook groups have been provided protocols and codes of conduct that enable members of the public to participate in the groups, but that the administrators will remove individuals if their conduct is not aligned with the code of conduct and is offensive. Such behavior is not conducive to productive dialogue, and as such, the group administrators may not allow certain participation due to that offending behavior. And I wanted to update the board on the outcome of the grant and aid funds that went to HCTF, in part because our staff report from April 20th, the EASC meeting, stated that CVRD staff would work with HCTF to ensure that broad participation. And we have not provided any further public information on the matter, but having a public record is important as follow-up action. So if there's any questions from the directors, I'd be happy to take them.
Great. Thanks, James, for that update. Are there any questions? Okay, do we need to receive that, or we're just good? Okay. All right, so on to item 9, updates to CVRD officer bylaw and signing authorities.
Second.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I'll just ask Jake Martins to come forward and give an explanation to the proposed changes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the proposed changes can be described generally as housekeeping improvements based on the recent structural changes to the regional district. So the appointment of James Warren as the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer and myself as the General Manager of Corporate Services. And so the officers bylaw provides for the naming of those 2 positions as well as the others, and also identifies the statutory duties and their assignment to the various individuals. The final component of the report also notes the financial signing authorities, and that again is largely housekeeping in nature, given the impending retirement of Beth Dunlop and the new hiring of Myra Fort. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jake. Are there any questions? Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if we have a change in roles at the table for these meetings, given that Mr. Martins is no longer the person reading out the motions and such, and if there might be an opportunity to acknowledge that change.
Yes, so as the General Manager, you may see Jake a little less frequently. Taking his new position is Lisa. And Lisa, you will see in the position of helping guide us in terms of having great agendas and sound minutes.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
We'll miss you back there, Jake.
And congratulations and welcome to Lisa.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we are on receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries, and we're on to recommendation 1. Thank you. And the recommendation is that the board consider granting ratings to Comox Valley Regional District Officer Bylaw number 21, 2008, amendment number 4, as outlined in the staff report dated June 15, 2020. Any further discussion? Okay, this is a vote of the full board, so I'll go through the roll. Director Swift? Director Grant?
In favor.
Director Cole? Cole Hamilton?
In favor?
Director Morin?
In favor.
Director Hillian?
In favor?
Director Frisch?
In favor.
Director Arbor?
In favor?
Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Hamir?
In favor.
Thank you. That carries. And we're on to recommendation 2.
Move.
Thank you. And the recommendation is that the following positions be appointed financial signing authorities for the Comox Valley Regional District, and that any 2 of the following be authorized to co-sign: the Chair, Vice Chair, Chief Administrative Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, General Manager of Corporate Services, Manager of Financial Planning, or Corporate Legislative Officer. Any further discussion about this recommendation? Again, this is a vote of the full board. Director Swift?
In favor.
Director Grant?
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton?
In favor?
Director Moore?
In favor.
Director Hillian?
In favor?
Director Frisch?
In favor.
Director Arbor?
Yes.
Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Hamir?
In favor.
Thank you. That passes. And we're on to bylaw and resolutions for first, second, and third reading.
I'll move that bylaw 618 be given or passed for second and third reading.
Second.
Yep. So this is for bylaw 618, which is the officer bylaw. And this is for first and second reading. And it's a vote of the full board. Any questions or comments before we move forward? Director Swift?
In favor.
Director Grant?
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton?
In favor?
Director Morin?
In favor.
Director Hillian,
In favor?
Director Frisch,
In favor.
Director Arbor,
Yes.
Director Grave,
Yes.
Director Hamir.
In favor.
Thank you. That passes, and we are on to third reading of the bylaw. Thank you. Again, full vote of the board. I'll go reverse order this time. Director Hamir,
In favor.
Director Grieve,
In favor.
Director Arbor,
Yep.
Director Frisch,
In favor.
Director Hillian,
In favor?
Director Moran,
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton,
In favor.
Director Grant,
In favor.
Director Swift.
In favor.
That passes. Thank you. And we are on to final adoption. Bylaw number 609, Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw 520, 2019, Amendment number 4.
Move final adoption.
Thank you.
Second.
Yep, so this is for final adoption and it's a vote of the areas. Any further comments, questions about this? Okay, Director Hamir,
In favor.
Director Grieve,
Affirmative.
Director Arbor, Director Arbor.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. That passes. And we're on to new business. Item 1 is Vancouver Island Mountain Sports Society.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. And it's a request that local government sponsor the society's application for grant funding from the Comox Valley Community Foundation. Any comments or questions? Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it was a bit of an 11th hour thing, but I did get a call from members of the society regarding an application they had put forward to the Comox Valley Community Foundation for grant. And at the time, I guess they hadn't realized that they didn't have the right status to apply. And we're wondering if there would be a sponsor. I think Courtney was also contacted, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm very happy and I'd like to commend staff on moving this forward. Although they missed that particular intake of the grants, at least they'll have a chance next time round to keep get some money to keep that very worthy facility operating on the mountain. So thank you very much to staff.
Thank you. I actually did have a question for staff as well about maybe an example of some other societies that we've done this for and what sort of liabilities come with the position.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll ask Kevin Duval to come forward, Manager of Financial Planning, to provide you with a response.
Thank you very much to the CEO and the chair to the director. So yes, this is something we have done for other organizations in the past. Most recently, I believe we've done that for the Hornby Island Resident Ratepayers Association over on Hornby Island for an application that they were looking at putting forward to the Community Foundation. And this is actually based on a practice that's been in place since 2007. So there was a policy developed by the board and the organization at the time that said as long as the application and the organization is in alignment with a service that we already provide. In this case, that would be the recreational grant service. And if that organization did fail to have the charitable tax status that is required by the Community Foundation, that upon the approval of the board, we would proceed and act as basically a flow through of those funds.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are on receipt. Are there any further questions? Oh, sorry, it's not. Yes, we are on receipt. So this is for the full board. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, we move to the requested action.
Move the requested action.
Thank you. And the requested action is that the CVRD confirmed that it will be a local government sponsor to the Vancouver Island Mountain Sports Society for the society's application for the grant funds from the Comox Valley Community Foundation. This is a vote of the full board, so I'll go through the roll. Director Hamir,
Approve.
Director Grieve,
I approve as well.
Director Arbor,
Yes.
Director Frisch,
In favor.
Director Hillian,
In favor.
Director Moore,
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton,
In favor?
Director Grant,
In favor.
Director Swift.
In favor.
Thank you. And that passes. And we move on to item 2, which is external appointment reports from directors.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. And this is verbal updates and other reports from external bodies. And Director Hillian, did you want to speak to your external appointments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to clarify, these are not actually external appointments. These are duties that I take on. In the one case, the regional hospital relates to the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital Board. So it's not actually an appointment of this committee, of this board rather. And my involvement with the Accessibility Committee, which I think is relevant, is also not a formal appointment. So I may be out of order here, and it may be as a result of a misunderstanding in my over-enthusiastic reporting to staff.
No, thanks for the clarification.
All right, well, I'll be happy to give 2 very brief reports then. The first one related to the Accessibility Committee, I think is relevant to the board. I'll just clarify that after being elected to serve on this board, or appointed rather to serve on this board back in 2018, I actually met with CVRD staff in December of that year to discuss potential support for the Accessibility Committee in the community, which was struggling at the time. Director Frisch and myself attended several of their meetings and realized that there was additional need for a support structure. And further discussion did take place with City of Courtenay staff and that committee, which demonstrated that need for organizational support, as well as a policy lens in local government. The committee actually presented to Courtenay Council in June of 2019 and to this board on October 8th of 2019. Both presentations highlighted issues with accessibility related to both public spaces and transportation and the organizational support needs of the committee. In response to a City of Courtenay resolution to have city staff work with the CVRD to develop a regional accessibility strategy, CVRD staff wrote to the city in September 2019, indicating that a report would be forthcoming to the board considering such a strategy and the support needs of the Accessibility Committee. In recent months, while awaiting the noted report, the Accessibility Committee has been supported to develop a working relationship with the Comox Valley Social Planning Society. The 2 organizations have agreed to a statement of intent whereby the Social Planning Society would provide the Accessibility Committee with an administrative structure subject to available grant funding. It is my hope that the upcoming staff report, which I think may be coming our way in July, will identify some options for us to consider next steps to support these community agencies and thereby ensure the ongoing viability of the Accessibility Committee. And though not a formal appointment, I've certainly been pleased to work through this process with the people involved to support that end. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that.
In relation to the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District, I just wanted to inform the board that I've attended 2 multi-region meetings involving officials from Island Health and Vancouver Island Hospital District chairs. I've also attended meetings with staff and Chair Cornfield regarding a proposed strategic planning session that may occur this fall or later. And of note, Island Health advises that there is a need for approximately 2,000 new long-term care beds on the island. And this is something that could potentially become a subject of discussion for hospital districts. It's also notable that in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, a provincial review of long-term care standards is expected, along with the replacement of congregate beds, that is residents of those facilities where there's more than one to a room, which people will be aware has been a challenge in relation to the pandemic. And it is acknowledged that there are various funding options, as well as a recognized need for more engagement with smaller communities. So these are some pieces of information that may be of interest to the board and those of us who sit on the hospital board. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Director Hillian. Director Arbor, you submitted a written report, I believe, but do you have any additional things that you would like to update the board?
Well, thanks for the reminder. I think it's the same as Director Hillian. My third item that is not just a verbal report is actually not an appointment of this board. It is with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans around aquaculture reform and suggestions to it. And if people have questions on it, I think I did mention it before, but the exercise has now concluded. The recommendations have been sent to the minister. It's been a really good process, and Richard Hardy from Comox First Nations was also involved. So we look forward to the government's response on our recommendations.
Thank you. Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question for Director Arbor in relation to the library board, which his report touches on. And other directors may be aware, I've started receiving letters as part of an organized letter writing campaign, which comes up fairly regularly on different subjects. This one talking about the reopening of the library. And while most of the letter writers are in their identical letters are expressing strong support for the work of the library, they also reference it as shocking that the library is not open yet when all sorts of shops in the community are open. That's probably the only part of their letter that I disagree with. I hardly think it's shocking that a public body is taking appropriate precautions under the circumstances that we're in. But I'm just wondering if Director Arbor is aware of any initiative that the library board may be taking to let the public know what is planned for reopening maybe. Thank you.
Thank you to Director Hillian for answering his own question regarding the concern that libraries are not open. As we can tell, even at the regional district, we're being very careful around the reopening of libraries. Currently, there is a takeout service for books that's emerging. It hasn't hit the valley yet, but many libraries around Vancouver Island have been able to implement that. Based on some of the risks with obviously it's a very tactile environment when people touch books and all these different things. They are following recommendations as everybody else for sectors, and they are hoping that late summer or in the fall that libraries will be able to reopen to provide some service. But in the interim, it's a takeout service. So I will update the board if it changes. And in regards to the series of letters that have been sent, just please know our CAO has sent responses to every single letter that has been written in regards to that, explaining a detailed response, explaining our procedures and why it is taking time. And I could probably provide this to the board if you guys are interested.
Thanks very much.
Okay, any further comments, questions? And is there anyone opposed to receipt of the reports? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. And we're on to item 3, UBCM resolutions.
Receipt.
A second. Thank you. Okay, and these are this is correspondence from Director Hamir regarding a request to forward 2 resolutions relating to food security during emergencies to UBCM for consideration at their 2020 convention.
Move receipt.
Yep, we got that. Thank you, Director. And we'll go to Director Hamir.
Great, thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak to the resolutions. So this ties in a little bit with our previous discussion on our external appointments. So I am the external appointment to the Comox Valley Food Policy Council. And as you know, during the COVID crisis, our Food Policy Council was able to pivot really quickly, seeing the need for emergency food programs when the food bank closed down. And a number of hot meal programs were unable to continue. And many of us around the table helped to fund a lot of these emergency food programs out of grants and aid. And I know the cities and village and town provided their own fundings as well, which did take quite a toll on us, I think. So the first resolution is in regards to that idea that food security wasn't really something that was initially part of the emergency planning system. And so we are asking UBCM that UBCM request the province to provide greater consideration for food security supply, but to include localized knowledge so that local groups are kept abreast of what's happening at the EOC level, but that funding resources are given to local governments so through their EOCs so that these types of actions can take place. And then the second requested action is in regards to farmers markets. So we were very lucky in the Comox Valley that our farmers market never had a shutdown, but other communities were not so fortunate. Nanaimo's farmers market was shut down for some time, and some are actually, from what I understand, still not open. And so second resolution is asking that the province declare farmers markets as an essential service during all provincial and local states of emergency, even if it's not a pandemic, an earthquake, a fire. Farmers do have, especially when our food supply is disrupted, farmers have a system of food storage, and it's in the ground or in our coolers, and we are able to quickly gather those food resources and make them available to the community. So I think markets play a very important role in states of emergency, and so this is just to ensure that they continue to have that status without having to continually ask the province to declare them as essential services. So, and I'm happy to take any questions for those on the table.
Thank you, Director Hamir. Yeah, I think it's really important. We did a great job as a province and a region, I think, responding to COVID, but there were some things that fell through the cracks that weren't directly addressed by any one ministry, like Island Health or Emergency Management BC, and certainly food was one of those things. So I think it's great to bring that up to the province and find a more concrete place for that within our emergency response. Director Hillian?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Director Hamir for bringing these resolutions forward. It's difficult to remember now the furor of controversy in the community at the start of the pandemic that the farmers market was actually going to remain open, and I'm really gratified that that's been clarified through the work of all concerned. I'm just wondering if there was any consideration of including Island Health in these resolutions, since it came out in some of our discussions with both the emergency response center and the local medical health officer, that Island Health does not necessarily look at food security as a health concern, whereas I think most people would agree that access to quality food is a significant determination of health. So I'm just wondering if there's any consideration to including that in the resolution, or if it's felt that communicating to the province would encompass that.
I have to admit, Island Health wasn't named through the Food Policy Council, and I should also mention that the first resolution was also crafted by the BC Association of Farmers Markets. And we're very lucky to have Vicki Brown, who's the chair from a local municipality here. I'm curious about that because some of the indications I did get when we brought this up to our medical health officer was that Island Health just did not have the resources, and she would often refer us to the province. So yeah, just thinking about who has the resources to enact some of this, I think it still does sit with the province.
Thank you.
Director Grieve?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would just applaud Director Hamir for bringing this forward. I think that we live in a valley that's the land of plenty, as they say, and we have so much. We are 1/3 of all agricultural land reserve on Vancouver Island, and I think since Director Hamir has sat at this board, she's definitely represented that sector to a great degree. So I definitely will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Morin?
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as the City of Courtenay's Food Policy Council rep, obviously I'm in agreement and full support of these resolutions. And I don't know if bringing these forward and having the province take some action on this will assist beyond local government, but I know that our local business community was also a huge part of assisting with food security. And of course, those businesses, restaurants, etc., most of them had to be closed, and yet they were providing labor and goods to the community. And so I'm hopeful that that might be part of the larger discussion as well. It's interesting that the folks who are already, experiencing their own hardships were the first to kind of jump in and help the folks that were even more vulnerable. So, and I'm hoping that that the other local governments maybe will endorse these resolutions if they go forward today. So thank you so much to Director Hamir for bringing them forward.
Thank you. So we are on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, that passes, and we're on to requested action number 1.
Move number 1.
Second.
And the requested action is, whereas food security and food supply issues are essential to all emergency response and recovery efforts, and whereas the status and consideration of food security and supply issues are not adequately addressed within the provincial emergency management system and structures, therefore be it resolved that the Union of BC Municipalities requests that the province provide greater consideration of food security and supply, including localized knowledge within the provincial emergency management structure, and provide guidance and resources to local governments and their emergency operation centers for this purpose. And this is a vote of the full board. So I'll go through the roll. Director Hamir?
In favor.
Director Grieve?
In favor.
Director Arbor?
Yes.
Director Frisch?
In favor.
Director Hillian?
In favor.
Director Morin?
In favor.
Director Cole-Hamilton?
In favor.
Director Grant?
In favor.
Director Swift?
In favor.
Thank you. That passes. And we're on to requested action number 2.
Move.
Thank you. And that action is, whereas farmers markets are a key resource in addressing food security during an emergency by providing access to food quickly and efficiently, and whereas farmers markets have not been consistently permitted to operate across the province during the COVID-19 pandemic, therefore be it resolved that the Union of BC Municipalities requests that the province take the necessary steps to ensure farmers markets are identified as an essential service during all provincial and local states of emergency. Any further comments or questions? Director Grant?
No, I'm good.
Oh,
So
okay. So again, a vote of the full board. Director Swifts?
I had my hand up.
In favor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Director Arbor, you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess the vote has started, but
That's okay. We'll start it again.
well, as an essential service during all provincial and local states of emergency, I'm thinking about fires and earthquakes and floods. I have to stretch my mind a little bit. I guess it's fine, but I could see circumstances where if an area gets evacuated, that obviously maybe the farmer's market would not operate in that area. So I'm
Sure.
just trying.
Well, if you can picture, Director Arbor, if your food supply is cut off to Hornby or Denman, but you have a farmers market group that, they be allowed to continue and provide the food that would otherwise be coming from off island. So that's the type of service that they would continue to supply.
Okay, that's good. My remark is not strong enough to change my vote, so it's all good.
Okay, so we'll start again with Director Swift.
In favor.
Thank you. Director Grant,
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton,
Favor?
Director Morin,
In favor.
Director Hillian,
In favor?
Director Fish,
In favor.
Director Arbor,
Yes.
Director Grieve,
In favor.
and Director Hamir.
In favor.
And that passes. Thank you. So we will move to in camera.
Could we take a slight break for a few minutes?
Great
Stretch
idea.
break.
How about we give 5 minutes?
Madam Chair, just a quick one. We've heard we've got a new chief